Hi everyone, my name is Vihika Jain. Welcome back to Decoding with WINFO. We're so excited what we have in store for you today. We're joined by Kathy Mitchell, a senior informatics advisor here at the University of Washington. We're so glad you can make it and so excited to ask you a couple questions about informatics and your journey to get here. Could you start by sharing a little bit about yourself and then we'll go into your journey?
Sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Kathy Mitchell. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an academic advisor in the information school at the University of Washington, working primarily with students who are pursuing the informatics, the Bachelor of Science in Informatics major. How did I get here? Let me think. I have a background in a much different I have a lot of different experiences in my background in terms of what I've done. Probably most notable was my undergraduate degree, which I refer to with students a lot, was in business. And I graduated from a university a lot like this, a really big school called the University of Minnesota, that's in a city called Minneapolis. And I'm not really sure why I majored in business. Everyone just told me I should. And I soon discovered when I graduated that there's not a job called business. You don't just become a business person. You really need to focus on something that relates to business or the practice of that. So I got a job, I moved to the West Coast, and then I went back to school after a couple of years to get my MED, which is a master's in education, to be a math teacher. And so I lived in Arizona at the time, and that's my first job in the education arena. And fun fact, the first job that I had was teaching junior high school math, which is just a lovely age, in Arizona. And when I moved to Washington, I was kind of burned out on teaching after a few years, and so I applied for and was hired at Microsoft. And so you might ask why? Microsoft. I have a really strong math background because that's what I was teaching, and also a teaching background and a business background. So I worked in product support and development for Excel, the product Excel or the software. So a lot of my time was teaching clients and customers features and things in Excel. It was also a lot of problem solving, like helping people write macros, do things like that. So that was the first foray that I really had in technology. And so did that for a while. Ended up having, I have 3 children, so I ended up having a couple of babies and did this and that. And then I started teaching. I went back to teaching, but I taught at the at Bellevue Community College. So I taught Excel, Access, to business students. And I liked that. I did it part-time for a long time. And then that's how I ended up in advising, is I really liked talking with students, like real people, about what their dreams and aspirations and goals were. And I thought maybe that's something that I would like doing. And so my first role was at UW Bothell. And I left that role to come here because my role there kind of moved away from student-facing. It was more campus-wide initiatives. And so now I'm working here with the undergraduate program.
Awesome. Wow, what a journey. That's a lot of different skills you probably picked up along the way.
Well, it definitely wasn't boring.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. That's amazing. Can you briefly describe to us what you do as the iSchool's advisor?
Yeah, so an academic advisor is kind of what it sounds like. I advise students. I don't give them advice, but I advise them on how to navigate this place called the University of Washington. More specifically, how to navigate being a student in the iSchool and being an informatics student. And so I would say that a lot of my role is guiding, informing, listening, I think more than anything. I also am responsible for hiring, training the peer advisors that we have that are upper division informatics students. I also teach a course for our direct to major students. So that's kind of in a nutshell the things that I do. as an academic advisor. Just ensuring that students are on track academically so that they are able to graduate in a timely manner and hopefully have an impactful experience while doing it.
Yeah, awesome. I think being in the iSchool is so unique, and oftentimes informatics is also a really unique kind of major to a lot of people. Could you describe it? If you had to describe informatics to someone who's never heard of it, how would you explain it?
Yeah, that is a really good question because I think that I've been asked that question a number of times, because informatics is not as well known of a degree program.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a made up word. It's not really like in Europe, it means, like in Germany, it means that's computer science. That's what they call it, computer science. So in this country, or in this education system, the informatics degrees at here versus University of Michigan are really different. The curriculum's really different. And so I often am asked this, like I was just on a flight last week and someone saw my little tag and they said, "What is informatics?" And the way I would explain it, it's an interdisciplinary major that looks at information in the context of data science, programming, computer programming, looking at ethical uses of information, misinformation. We also have some tracks in biomedical health informatics. So really, in a nutshell, it's examining and applying technology and data and information to a field of study, like biomedical health informatics. So that's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
It's not one thing. So it's not a really, really specialized degree. Like if you majored in chemistry, almost all your classes would be chemistry classes. Informatics, you're studying design, database design, information technology, how to utilize information that exists, which is very relevant in any field.
Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with describing what I am majoring in, because I would love for more people to know about it, but it's also so hard to encapsulate what informatics is in a quick sentence like it is for a couple other majors. That kind of brings me to my next question. What exactly, you kind of touched over this already, but at UW, what exactly makes informatics such a unique program compared to other tech-related majors like HCDE or computer science or kind of other realms like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's also a good question. There are similarities and differences. I would say for the CSE major, that's computer science engineering, it's an engineering major. Informatics is not an engineering major. In fact, you're not even required to take math classes, which is, kind of shocking. Was shocking to me at first. It's more statistics and data analysis, whereas in computer science, you are studying in great depth theory and practice of the study of computer science and engineering. So you're also studying physics, you're studying all the things that you would identify with as an engineer. That's not this major, right? HCDE, Human-Centered Design, so that's also an engineering degree because it's called engineering. And that, I would say, is more focused on how do humans interact with technology or information or design of a user interface, for instance. And there's a lot of research and crossover in the information school where there are information groups that study how do children use technology? What colors are they interested in? There's a professor, Jason Yip, who has published a lot also on, youth, adolescence. How does information and social media affect potentially mental health of students and anxiety and things like that? So it's very interdisciplinary, and it's less about design and it's more about the human interaction of information.
Yeah, amazing answer. I think there's so many things that I wish more people knew about informatics, but if you had to tell informatics students, either if they're new or prospective, informatics students, what is one thing you wish they all knew?
one thing I wish that all informatics students knew about the informatics degree.
Yeah, about anything.
Well, I think that more than anything is what I alluded to when I talked about, that's why I shared my little bio. Because when I went to college, and I'm really old, so it was a long time ago, but it was very much like this. It would be like getting into the Foster School of Business. I did all the financial accounting, all these classes, and I thought, this is the major for me. And once I got into it, I realized, I'm not really sure why I chose this major. And then I was in too deep, right? Because then I couldn't backtrack and say, well, on second thought, maybe. So I think that the main thing that I would say is, similar to there's not a job called business.
Yeah.
There's not a job the minute you walk out the door at UW called informatics. So I think reverse engineering why you chose informatics.
Yeah.
Why? Because you could choose 180 some different majors here. So why informatics, and what does that say about you? And how to engage in those things while you're here from the beginning. And kind of like thinking about it, it seems like when you start college, you have these it's daunting. You've got all this stuff ahead of you. You don't really know what to do. And then time gets really short and you're like, how did I prepare myself to do what I want to do when I leave here? So that in a nutshell is what I would say is really the why. And how do you describe your journey in informatics to someone who's interested, like maybe a recruiter?
Yeah. I think reverse engineering is a great way that I would describe that kind of simulation. But if you could give us more advice on how students should think about discovering a focus area, or any advice or resources for those that are still exploring. I know informatics has a couple of tracks, but within those tracks, there's also focus areas like management, cybersecurity, things like that.
Yeah.
How do you recommend us, giving us the best chance to explore all of those different focus areas and really kind of hone in and find our niche within informatics?
Yeah, so everyone really has to find their niche.
Yeah.
And some people are really interested in design, like in UX design or whatever they're interested in. The way that I think most students discover that is that the core classes that all of the informatics students are required to take explore those focus areas. The 360 class explores program management. Database designs obviously looks at database. All students are required to complete the introductory programming course, which is in Java or Java or Python. So I think by exploring those things, it helps you discern whether or not, this is what I want to focus on.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not going to be just taking classes, it's going to be taking additional classes. So we do have two focus areas that they're transcriptable. I mean, they're part of, one of them is biomedical health informatics. The only difference between a student who's choosing their own electives and choosing one of those tracks or focus areas is the elective courses that you take. There's also a data science option.
Yeah.
So it's a really good way to be a little bit more specialized in those fields.
For sure. Yeah. I think kind of making those required informatics courses definitely gives us exposure to all of those different topics. How would you say informatics prepares students for careers in tech, business, design, or anything? Like, I know info, at least for my perspective, has given me the foundation to kind of explore a lot of different careers. And I would say that it's one of the best majors to get a great foundation to go and do those things. How would you kind of, answer that question? How does info prepare students for careers in tech?
Well, one thing that I've noticed that's really interesting to me about the informatics degree is that when I'll use myself as an example. When I worked at Microsoft and I was hired, I didn't get to choose who I worked with. Like I was plopped down in a group. I had to be part of a group, right? I had to be a functional member of that group. every person in the group has a role. We're not all doing the same thing, right? And so a lot of what informatics students do in the classroom and outside is working in groups and taking on roles and identifying problems or things and exploring designing a solution for that thing,
Yeah.
right? And so if you, in terms of jobs, if you worked at Microsoft, most likely, if you were applying for a position there, it's basically like a software company, you're not going to be competitive as a CSE, like as a software design and SD, software design engineer, because you're not an engineer. However, do you need to know anything about computer science? Well, yeah, because that's what the company does. So you would know how to, learn different languages like Python based on learning Java and learning what object-oriented programming is. It's all transferable to other things.
Yeah.
So I would say, to your point, having one job or one thing in mind, you change your mind. Like, that's why I told you about my history. You don't do one thing the rest of your life. Well, I mean, some people do. But it's my hope that you get to discover what makes you unique.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly what I would answer the question with. I know that, like, when I was working over the summer, other experiences when I, got to be in a team where I didn't really get to choose what role I was doing or what role my teams were doing, or even in like hackathons on campus, like, because I had experience navigating group projects in informatics and building those multifaceted skills, I was able to be put in a position that I could still excel at and maybe learn a thing or two along the way. Well.
And that's by design.
Yes, that's important. Kind of going over to the student perspective, I know imposter syndrome is something that I've dealt with. We've had a couple podcasts on it before too. We've talked a lot about it within WINFO as well, but it's kind of something that a lot of info students and honestly just students deal with. What advice do you have for those who may be going through it or struggling with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that is a very good question, because I think if we are all being honest with ourselves, I think we all have suffered from imposter syndrome somewhere, someplace, because every new environment is different. Mm-hmm. I would say that at a big university like this, I remember the feeling. I used to, before I started college, at University of Minnesota, I used to think I was pretty, smart. Or, I just thought, I don't really struggle in school, really. I don't. And I study, I do fine. But once I got into that huge university, I felt like everyone knew way more than I did. Everyone did. I was like, how can I be so unprepared? And it just you feel like you don't really belong here.
Yeah.
And so we try to make our spaces, our conversations as inclusive as possible by really even training the peer advisors. The main focus is belonging and non-deficit language. You're not good enough or you didn't get a good enough grade. It's refocusing on what you are capable of and that you do belong here. Mm-hmm. So imposter syndrome is, it's something that we talk about in the Info 290 class for the direct to majors, because I think that if you're human,
Yeah.
But the programs that may foster a sense of I don't belong here, it's their responsibility to train and be as inclusive as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think, with classes like Info 290 that's required for all informatics students, those kinds of changes are being made and it's definitely apparent. So I think we're on the right track with informatics. I think kind of moving on again to the student perspective, what are some of your favorite success stories or moments from being in this kind of academic advisor role?
Yeah, that's a really good question because there are so many. But when I first started here, I've been here a little over 3 years. There was a student who, of course, will remain unnamed, And this student was not doing well academically and had been admitted to the major, had, for the past couple of quarters, they had a really fine GPA, and for the past couple of quarters, they were getting like zeros. But they were flying under the radar because their cumulative GPA was still where it needed to be. But then they were dismissed due to low scholarship eventually, right? And they were really at risk of, they weren't dismissed, but they were really close to it. So when I met with this student, again, going back to the imposter syndrome, rather than focusing on like, what have you been doing? Like, it's really hard to get, I do acknowledge things, I'm honest. Like, I acknowledge with the student, you know, it's really hard to get a 0 in a class. We don't want to give zeros. And this, I pointed out how well the student was doing academically. They were admitted to the major. I pointed out some of the grades in the courses that tend to be more difficult for some people, like CSE courses, upper division. This student was getting well above 3.5 in those courses. So he belonged in the major. Like he deserved, you know, to be in the major. But there were other things outside of life that were affecting his ability to even go to class, I guess, and that's not my business. But I pointed out how he was doing really well, and then for these 3 consecutive quarters, these were really outliers. They didn't look like these quarters. So as an advisor, I'm suspecting there's something else going on besides you just deciding you don't want to go to class.
Yeah.
So that led to, because he was ready to just leave and just do something else. So a success for that was he was in trouble with a lot of things, and he knew it. Like, I didn't have to tell him, you are at risk, you know, he knew that. But I could, as an ally or as a supporter, do what I could have had in my control, which was write a letter of support so that he could repeat a class for a 3rd time, for his financial aid to not run out. And these were things where I was kind of putting myself on the line saying, this student, you know, basically is not a risk. That student ended up graduating last year, and he was at the graduation ceremony, and he said, I don't think I would be here if it weren't for you. And I said, that's not true. It's just, you know, we all fall down sometimes, and it's how you face that is the most important. So there are stories like that where students are really falling off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes to show that, you know, having a mentor out there, having an advisor that will stick up for you is really important. So I appreciate you being in the position that you are to keep us going. Real quick, what is your best advice for someone considering applying to informatics?
I would say explore informatics is the why. You know, like what is it about the major that appeals to you? And be open to applying for other majors too. Because this is a really good major for a lot of people. Not for everyone though. I mean, so I would say just the why.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And then finally, we're going to end it off with, what is one word or phrase that you'd use to describe the informatics program and why?
One word or phrase, I would say adaptive. Because the information changes all the time. Yeah. And I think that the curriculum and the focuses are very adaptive to what's happening in the world, and in the world of technology, in the world of information, in the world of misinformation, all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's it for my questions. We're gonna move on to a quick Q&A. If anyone has any questions, we appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Of course.
It's always awesome to get, you know, an insider's perspective on informatics. If we have any questions from the audience, we'd love to hear them.